Hello everyone, so in this lecture I'm going to show you how you can download and install Windows in this virtual machine. You can install any Windows version you want, like Windows 10, 7, even new latest version of Windows 11 is also supported in Oracle VirtualBox, but we'll not gonna try that because it's a very long process and it will take a lot of time for me to download. As you can see, you can install all of those. So you can go to this website. First page is to download the Windows 11, which is 20 GB. So make sure you select this VirtualBox and it will download. So but I'm not gonna use this. You can, if you want to install Windows 11 on your VirtualBox, you can try that. The process the process that I'm going to show will be the similar for both Windows 7, 10, 11 and so on, but I'm going to show you for this one. So this is the easy process. So select the virtual machine or virtual. If you want to select a Windows 7 version, then you can select Windows 7. You can, if you want a Windows 8.1, you can choose 8.1. If you want Windows 10 stable version, you can choose stable Windows 10.1 for virtual machine and select the virtual machine platform. As we are using the VirtualBox, so we'll be using VirtualBox. Then just download this. This will take some time. It is most probably 4 to 5 GB, even more. It may be 6 to 7 GB. As you can see in here, it's 7 GB. So just download this and extract, and this file will show up. Then the same process as previously for the installation of this file that we downloaded onto this developer microsoft.com, which is the official page of this virtual machine. So let's just install now. Click new, name this as Windows 10. So Windows, make sure you select Microsoft Windows and make sure you select your Windows version and bit. So as I am using 64-bit, I will be selecting 64-bit. If you are using 32-bit, select 32-bit. Then click next. So machine folder. So okay, should I use this in here? Okay, let me check my machine folder. User Akash, VirtualBox, meta exploitable. So no, we are not gonna use it in here. We are going to, okay, let's select our destination folder where this virtual machine will be installed. So this is my virtual machine folder. So select this folder, click next and give the memory size. You can give this as much as the green line part, but I'm just going to give it as 2 GB. Then create a virtual disk, select this in here, then BMDK. What is our file extension? OVA. Okay, so select this, create a virtual hard disk, create, and make sure set all of this as default. So VDI, virtual disk image, select this. Then dynamically allocated, make sure you select this as well. So the file location, so let's give this as 40 GB because Windows 10 is a large operating system and it takes a lot of space. So select this as 40 GB. Okay, give there at 45 and then press create. And after that, it's all you need to do is select this as bidirectional, because what this means is you can just copy from your Windows machine to your this virtual machine, and you don't need to do anything. You can just copy and paste all of those items or text or on any clipboard. You can just copy paste simply from your Windows machine or main machine to your virtual machine. So this is, make sure you select drag and drop and clipboard to bidirectional, and system give this as 2 processor, display set all as default. So select empty, then choose a disk file, select the so select this as okay, I got it. I got the reason why it's not showing, because I already downloaded the full virtual machine file. So he didn't to actually do anything in here. So just click this delete, because it's already created all in this file, because we downloaded the full virtual machine file. So if you downloaded this file, this one, then you should have actually select all of those manually, but as we downloaded this full virtual machine file, so we need to actually do anything. It's pretty simple. So all I need to do is just click double press and it will automatically select all of those. So as you can see, so let's just change our directory. So select my virtual machine file and then just press import. Okay, let's see if okay, we will change all of the settings later. So let's first import all of those. And it will take some time, so let me pause and show you when this is done. So as you can see, it fully installed. So let me just change all of those settings. As I was saying, you need to select all of those as bi-directional, so that you can simply share clipboards from your Windows to this virtual machine. Without this, you cannot copy and paste into this in here. And then you select 4 GB as memory, because Windows, Windows is extremely power hungry, and make sure you select at least 2 processor. And display, select all of those as default. You need to change anything in here, and make sure you select bridge adapter if you are using Wi-Fi adapter like me. So this is the Wi-Fi adapter that I am using. And then other thing, you don't need to do anything, press OK and you are all done. So let's just press start, and it will load up Windows 10 inside your virtual machine. So I am using Windows 11 as my main machine, and I am using Windows 10 as my virtual machine. You can use Windows 7, Windows 8.1, even Windows 11 the same way that we show you. So let me show you a couple of things. So make sure you remember a couple of things, like this is the ISO file. So this is the ISO file, this is a virtual machine disk file, and this is a full virtual machine file. So these three files installed the three different way. So previously for Metasploit we select this in a different way, and for ISO we select just different way, and for this Windows as virtual machine, pretty simple, just double click and open and done. So there is a three different way to install this into your virtual box. So I think we are done, so let's just open. As you can see, so password is maybe pass WORD. Okay, so let's search about I forgot about the default Windows 10 virtual machine password. As you can see, the password. Okay, so make sure you remember this, which is capital P, then small p, a, double s, w, then o, not o, this is 0, number log 0, r, t, then as you can see it's done. So make sure you remember this is the password, this is the default password, and we are done. So we have a fresh new Windows 10 in our virtual machine, so you can do anything. And let's show you that my internet is working in here. As we select the bridge connection, let's go to Google. As you can see, it is working, my internet is up and working, so all is working. So that's how you download and install Windows on VirtualBox. As I was saying, the process that I show, it will work both on Windows 7, 8.1, Windows 11, and also Windows 10. And how to power off? Just simply press here, type power off the machine, power off, and done. That's it for the Windows VirtualBox. Previously, we learned what ARP is, how it works, and how we can use it to discover all the connected client on the same network. And this lecture, I'm going to focus on building an ARP spoofing program. Now, ARP spoofing program, program was to manipulate to and also to redirect the flow of target. So instead of it flowing, as you can see in this diagram, it would flow through my own computer. So any response sent and any response received by the target computer will have to flow through the hacker computer. This means that my message and your website and image and username or any password entered by the target will have to flow through my computer. So this allows me to read the information, modify it, and then drop it. So as you can see, this is very serious and very powerful attack, and the reason why it is possible is that because ARP is not secure. Now, for us to understand how this works, you need to have a basic understanding what ARP is, and I covered that at the start of our previous lecture. But if you don't remember how ARP works, let's just talk about briefly. But basically, ARP is used so that the client can identify other connected clients on the same network and get their MAC address, because as I said before, client connect with each other with the same network using the MAC address. So each computer have an IRP table and which link the IP address on the same network to their MAC address. So if I go to let's go to our Kali Linux machine. and if I just type ARP A, sorry, so ARP sorry, for some reason it wasn't showing the result, so I just fixed it. As you can see, previously it wasn't showing anything, now it's showing. So as you can see, it's linking to the router IP address. So this machine, anytime it needs to send any request to the internet, it will direct that request to the MAC address. So this is the MAC address, this is the router address, and this is our connected client, as you can see. So it will direct the request to this MAC address and to the MAC address, so that the associated with the IP of the router, which is this one 192.168.1.1. Now this value in here can be easily modified by exploiting the ARP protocol. So let's just go to, okay, let's also try on our different machine to see what this ARP tool shows on different machines. So let's try ARP minus A. As you can see, gateway and also two different MAC address on different machine. So let's also try on our Windows machine. As you can see, this is our dynamic vision, this is our router IP address. So let's go back to our diagram. So we have a diagram of a typical network. So you can see that normally any device that connected to the network, if it wants to send the request, it will send them to the router. So then this will go and send the request to the internet, and then it will wait for the response and then forward the response to the device that requested it. So if the hacker or victim or any other computer on the network wanted to send a request, they will send the request directly to the router. Now what we can do is we can exploit the ARP protocol and send to the ARP responses. So one of the gateway and one to the victim. So and we're going to tell the gateway that I am the IP of the victim. So the access point will update its ARP table and it will associate the IP of the target with my MAC address, and that will do same with the victim. So we'll send it a ARP response and we're going to tell it that I am attending this 192.168.1.1, which is the router IP address as we previously see, and it's going to update, and the ARP table is associated with the IP with my own MAC address. So the result of this is that the victim is going to think that I am the router and the router is going to think that I am the victim. So anytime the victim wants to send the request will then go and flow through my computer and I am going to forward them to the router. And then anytime to access the point or the router that will send responses, they are going to go to my machine because it thinks that I am the victim, and then I am going to forward it to the victim. And then this all puts me in the middle of the connection, man in the middle connection, and it gives me so much power, and we'll see all of that we can do. So once we become the man in the middle, now the main reason we can do all of this, because ARP is not secure. Because first of all, client cannot accept responses even if they did not send their request. So as I said before, we are going to send the responses to the access point under the response to the victim, telling that I am the I am a specific IP, without them asking who I am or without them asking for this IP. I am just going to send them the response, and then they are going to accept the response. So anyway, not only that, but there is also not going to verify, they are not going to verify who I am. So when I say that I am at that IP, which is this is going to trust and believe this. So even though I'm clearly not at this IP, because the access point of this IP, so these are the two main weaknesses with ARP protocol that allow us to run the ARP spoofing attack. Now let me show you a very simple way of implementing this, and in this lecture we'll deep deeper into ARP, and also in the next lecture I will also decode details about this. Now I have already created a new project and already created a simple code. So we are going to use a module called escapee, and I'm going to include it as documentation and the resources. So let's first import this module. So according to this, we have to import as usual how we import a Python code. So write the name of the module escapee, and we have to add .all to implement all the functions that we can use in this module. Now this is perfectly correct, and you can use escapee now in this code, and also you can do escapee.all. So dot the name of the function and then what you want to use. So I don't really like that, so I actually use it as escapee dot all as escapee. So every time I need to do something from escapee module, and instead of typing escapee.all, you can simply just type escapee.all as escapee. So now we're going to make a function, and we're going to call this function a scan, because it's going to scan for us, and we're going to make this function to take a variable for IP. So we use a very simple function that is in escapee module. So you can use this function as usual by doing a escapee followed by a function name which is IP, then the function which is arping, and all you have to do is give the IP to its function, and that's it. It's really as simple as that. And like I said, this is very simple for discovering clients on the same network using ARP protocol, but we'll dive deeper into it in our future lectures. So right now I just want to give you an overview. So in this main code, all you have to do is just call the function, because we didn't call the function anywhere in our code. So just call the function like in here, So what I'm going to do is just go and type scan, give the IP address that we want to scan. So let's say I want to scan IP of my router. So in my Kali Linux, if I just terminal and if I just run route -n, and this will give you all the information about your gateway, and also your IP addresses also mask. So this is the gateway of my Kali Linux IP address. So this IP exists as a result, and this should be put in here, because what we are going to do is we are going to be sent a broadcast asking who has this IP address. So in this case my router is going to respond for me and giving me my address. So just type your gateway. So this will vary from machine to machine. Make sure you check yours. So and then our code is done. Very simple. So let's go to the directory where our Python code is located. So as you can see, this is the directory of network scanner, and this is the code that we wrote. So all you have to do now is you have to run this code. So simply just open terminal in here, run Python, type Python and the name of the code, which is network underscore scanner.py, and just run it. And as you can see, we have the result here that we received, and we received one packet and we got one answer. So we have the IP address, we have the MAC address of my access point. Now this function right here, which is escape.arping, also take IP ranges. What I mean by ranges is that it means that it gives a way of specifying multiple IPs at the same time. So if I want to scan all the IP within the subnet, so if I want to scan 1 to 24, so you can just type /24 to specify the range from like 0 to 24. So in the last field of the IP, you can type anything, any range you want. So if I just save and run this again, as you can see, it gives all the other packets that we got, and it shows all of those results, and it returned me with valid IP with their MAC addresses, and it shows that what we can really do using this simply by ranging our IP address. So all I did is we imported a escape module, and we called a function called ARP ping, and we are giving it the IPOA or the range, and then it will just do everything on its own, and it's sending the broadcast, and it's receiving the responses, and it's parsing the responses and displaying the result for us on the screen. So we really did not do much, but that's okay. So in this lecture I wanted to show you how ARP works and how to use KP and ARP to discover all the clients in the same network. And in the next time I will show, and we'll go deeper, and we'll also reiterate the function in a more advanced way. Now the script that we built so far is really cool. It can list all the clients on the same network on us and their IP address and the associated MAC address, and it also doing all of this using ARP ping function, which is this from KSCAPI. So we also learned that ARP ping achieved this by sending ARP request as asking who has each possible IP address from the start of the subnet. So like from 0 to end, which is like 254, ARP ping send the request to the broadcast MAC address, so that all the client on the same network will receive this request. Now generally clients will ignore their request at that get unless their request is asking about their IP address. So in this case here, all the clients will ignore their request and that they are getting, except for the clients right here. So in this case, the client will respond with his MAC address saying that I have this IP address of my MAC address, and now ARP will do this for all possible IPs. Like I said, it will start from .0 to 24 or 254 at highest at the register, and all the response that it gets is its registered, and the IP address that it gets will be all the MAC address that these IPs are responding, and with this way it will be able to build up a list of all the IPs that are responded with their associated MAC address, which will give us the list of all the clients that are connected to the same network. Now because we know how this works, I would like to build this manually. So I like to build a function that works like ARP ping, and it will allow us to list all the clients around us, because I think ARP ping right here is doing so much for us. This being a programming lecture, I think we can dive deeper and learn more about Python as we do this, and also learn more about network and how packets and data is transferred through networks. So in order to achieve this, like we did before, when we have a big problem like we want to solve, it's better to break it down into simpler problem or smaller problems. So like one problem first, and then combine these two more solutions to reach our big solution. So I came up with a very simple algorithm to achieve this. So I will go now, and in our next lectures is going to be discover the clients on the same network. So initially achieve that what we did so far by building the function ourselves. So in order to come up with the steps to do this, I relied on how do we learn so far. So the first step going to be like create a ARP request directed to the broadcast MAC address asking for the IP. So basically it's just this step. We are going to need to create a packet that asks who has a specific IP, and this is going to be the ARP request, and it needs to be directed to the broadcast MAC address so that all the clients receive it, and then we need to be able to send this packet that we created and wait for the response, so that when a client responds with their MAC address, we will be able to capture that request and analyze it. And finally we will need to able to analyze the request that we get from all the clients and then print the result on the screen. So like we did before, we are going to forget about big or larger goal, which is discover all the clients on the same network, and in next time we are going to tackle each of these problem on at a time to solve this as a smaller problem, and then at the end we will combine everything together and combine this, and just to be trivial and simple, then we will be able to achieve the bigger goal. So the first step of our algorithm, or the first simple problem that we need to solve, is being able to create packets. So packet that we need to create has many features. So the first thing we need to do is we need to use ARP to ask who has a specific IP, and then we need to direct this packet to broadcast MAC address so that it gets delivered to all the clients on the same network. So first of all, see how we can create, and then first I need to do is I need to appeal or ask a request packet, and then ask about a specific IP that ask who. Now let's ask who has a specific IP. So literally we're going to building the something that looks like a packets and literally and packet that asks who has a specific IP. Now we're going to do in my script, I will write a simple script. So we'll talk about these two later. So let's first talk about these simple lines. So this is the same as previous. So first of all, we're going to use a variable and I'm going to call it ARP request is equal to escape.arp. Now we're going to use escape to create a ARP packet object. So you can think of a similar to the way that we created a parts object. So this time we created an object that represents the ARP packet. Now escape in the module that allows us to do that. So we're going to do is we're going to write so now that we have a variable called ARP request, which is this and this, it seems like a little confusing, but that's the truth of the structure, and in the next lectures you will see it all makes sense. Now first of all, escape class allow us to print the summary. So let's print this, which is ARP request.summary. So it will allow us to create a summary of the current object that we just created. So we can do just print ARP request.summary. So this is a method in the ARP class implemented by escape, and it's literally give us the summary that we will created right here. So let's run our code as right now with just simple print. As you can see, it gives us the summary, and the summary basically says that this will use the ARP protocol and is going to ask who has the specific IP, which is this, and which is the IP of our Kali Linux machine. So this result is like 000, which didn't show, but this is our IP of our Kali Linux machine, as you can see. So this is cool, but the only thing that the way that we want is if we look back to ask who has a IP address and it gives us 000, so we have to give this our main IP. So we actually need to have a variable that represent the IP in here, so you can guess it. So it's a variable that we are passing, and when we are calling this a function in here, which is the IP variable. So what you need to do is you need to say who is the IP and whatever IP that we put here, and we want to do this in a way that modify the object right here, and which will be this escape. So we're going to use a ls function. So what can I do is we're going to type escape.ls, and between the bracket put the name of the class that you want to run, the name of the variable, and that you can set it as a field. So in our case that is the ARP class, so we're going to say escape.arp. Now if we run this program like this, as you can see, you will see that it gives us a list of all the fields that we can set. and it gives us the description that each of these fields mean and the default value. So now we can see that the fields that we are interested is in the IP field right here. This is the IP field which is PDST. So we need to set PDST, and as you can see the default value of this is 000. So it is what we are seeing right now in here. Now we can set this into two ways. We can set this either way. So let's show you how we can set this in a couple of ways. So we need to just simply type this line which will set PDST value to IP value, which is this value. So what you are saying this is that the value of IP that gets passed to us, and when the function is called it will give us the set of IP, and this will work. So if we just run this now, as you can see it gives us the IP in here because we set this as PDST, and where's the net as this is the IP. So this works as you can see, but alternatively you can do this in a simpler way, and which is the way that I usually like. So what you need to do is you need to write this into this bracket, and then we just delete this line. It looks cooler, it's simpler, and this will work the same way as it work as you can see. It works pretty much the same way that we want, and the result also giving you the result that we also want, which is the IP address of our gateway. So as you can see, if we go back in here and to see what we achieved, this is that we have a packet that says who has the IP that we passed. So we are using a variable for the IP which is filing perfect. So in the next time we're going to tackle the next part of the packet that we need to create, which is make sure to write the destination of this packet and to the broadcast MAC so that it gets delivered and all the clients to the same network. So we'll see that in our next lecture. So we are still at the first step of our algorithm, which is creating a ARP request and that asks for a specific IP and is sent to the broadcast MAC address. Now we broke this down into even smaller parts. So the first part was to create an ARP request asking about the specific IP, and we achieved this in our previously. So and we already have stored and available hotcode ARP request. So verified it has right result by printing the summary of this packet. And the next thing that we need to do is we need to set our destination mark to the broadcast MAC address to make sure that this will be sent to all the client of the same network. Now in order to do this we need to use an Ethernet frame, because like I said, data and network using the MAC address do not have the IP address of the physical address. So this is on network card and the search MAC. So and the destination MAC address is set to the internet part of the each packet, not in any other part. So therefore we need to create an internet frame and then we append our ARP request to it later. So next time so in this lecture what we actually do is we are going to forget about everything and we are going to focus on creating an internet frame, and that will send to the broadcast MAC address. Now creating this is very similar the way that we created a ARP request. So I'm going to delete these two lines and let's type broadcast. Here already CST broadcast. is equal to escape dot ether then dst to set MAC address 3, 4, 5, 6. So as you can see, we type broadcast is equal to escape.ether in order to create a Ethernet frame and put two brackets. So it's very similar the way that we created an ARP packet. So all we are doing is we are saying that escape.ether and this is create an Ethernet object for us, and it is for escaping using a class that's implemented by Kepi, and it's going to store an instance of this broadcast in a variable called broadcast, which is this, just like we had to set our IP in our previous lectures. So what we are creating a ARP in here, we need to set MAC address of our broadcast MAC address. So the whole point of using Ether and here is that to make sure that the packet that will be sent to the broadcast MAC address and not only one devices. So we need to set the destination mark in here, which is DST, to the broadcast. Now again, we don't know how to do this because we don't know the field name. That's because the destination is like address. Therefore, just like what we did before, in order to get the name of all the field that we can set for the other class or for the other object, we can say that basically it created a broadcast object. This line is created a broadcast object to have ether frame property with DST MAC, which is this. Then let's type ARP request underscore broadcast is equal to broadcast slash ARP request. So we just what we did is we combined the ether from ARP request to send broadcast or ARP request. As you can see, we combine both broadcast and also ARP request, this one. Then we type and insert on WERED insert escape dot srp, then we put two bracket, then put ARP request underscore broadcast. So escape.srp, which is this, it is used to send the packets in ether from which we return the value answered or unanswered. And we need to also specify the timeout. So let's specify timeout is equal to 1. So if you don't add this timeout, you will be stuck, because if you don't get a response, you will never exit out of the program. Finally, after this, that we have all done, so let's print the answered 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 dot summary. So we're just going to print this, which is print answered, unanswered both. You can do both, print answer also unanswered. We'll show you how this differ between the print. So let's first try answered. So as I said, the answer will contain the answer pockets. So we are actually printing a summary of the answer that we got. So that's going on also on our code, and as you can see in the summary we have to see the first part. So let's run to see if this runs or not. As you can see, it's working and it's done. So we are printing a summary of the answer that we got, and as you can see in the summary we can see the first part, which is the request that we sent. So for example, this request we are asking who has like 192.168.1.1, and the response came from the MAC address saying this is this, and it is coming from this MAC address saying that I have the IP in here also, as you can see. So we are asking who has this, and they are showing this. So that's all here from in here. So response, these are the response and these are the MAC address and what's happened in here. So let's try the unanswered to see what happens. As you can see, we have much more entries in here, and as you can see you are asking like who has this IP address, who has this IP address says this is the IP address, and it's getting to know the response, and we are asking who has this IP address and it's getting no response. So as you can see, this tells us that these IPs are not used by any clients on the network, which means that there is no client using them. Okay, now that we have the second small problem, or the second step is done, so, and we are able to send packet asking for a specific MAC address, and we are also getting this like similarly, and also we are able to capture the response in a variable, and also we call the variable answered. Now it's time to move to the next step, which is parsing the response that we got. So from our previous lectures or previously, you know that the response that we are getting is being stored on a variable called answered. Now all we did is we printed the answer.summary, as you can see in here, and we get a summary, which is a method that's implemented by the escapee, and the print is the summary of the content that is stored in the answer variable. And we see that we will print all of us requests and the responses that we got for the request. Now this is very useful for us because as we know that what we are looking for, but if we want to present this to a user, or if we want to use this further on a program that to do something else with this information that we got, so if you want to actually use a MAC address which is in here to do further attacks, then we need to able to access this MAC address variable on its own, because what we are doing right now is we are printing all the response and the request that trigger those responses. So there is a lot of data that is not useful for us to combine with the data that is useful to us. So what we really wanted to do is we need to able to isolate the MAC address and the IPs so that we can first of all print them to a user who is not interested into no one was request that we send or any of this clutter right now in here. So we are also going to be able to use this in a program and then organize the other programs in the future to run further attacks to carry further tasks. So our objective right now in the first step is, which is the third smaller problem, is to able to parse this mysterious variable which is this answer.summary. So now what you need to do is you need to set this as list. So we are capturing this by saying answered and unanswered. Now we know these variable are lists, so it will be useful to name them something meaningful since we are doing that from the start. So I'm going to call answer underscore list, unanswered underscore list, then also in print answer underscore list. Let's save our code. So I'll just update this and we'll call all of this at the end is list. Now what I'm just doing is so that my code is more readable, so that it's easier even for me to understand. So now we know this is a list, but we never talk about the list. So we don't know what lists are and we don't know how they work, how to deal with them and also how to use them. So right now I'm going to give you an overview on list, and then in next we'll come back and we'll see how we can pass the answer list and extract useful information from it. So what are lists? So lists are very useful. You might have heard them in other programming language, like they are called arrays, but in Python they would refer to arrays as list. So what I mean by a list is an array, and it's a list of value or element that are kind of related to each other, so they can refer the same thing and are used in a similar problem as we can access based on only one variable name. So I like to give you a very quick example before we move back to the programming type programming. So I'm just go to the terminal and just simply type Python, and the Python will load up, and simply type lucky number underscore list, and my lucky numbers are 3, 7, 8, 17, 24. So what I'm doing is, first of all, I'm just creating a list and we're going to call this as lucky number list, and we're going to mix that to equal to my lucky numbers. And again, remember, when you are going to set value between the two brackets and separating them by commas, so the numbers that I put as this. Now let's try to access the first element, which is 3. So simply just type print lucky number list and the bracket is 0, which is the first element, and as you can see it gives us 3, which is our first element. Now if I get number 3, then actually this is the variable name and you will get number 3. So this is a very simple example. So if you want to access the second element, just simply type list 1. As you can see, second element, which is 7. And if we want to access the third element or fourth element, let's for, as you can see, fourth element should be 17. As you can see, fourth 1 2 3 4 fourth 1 0 1 2 3 4. As you can see, fourth is 24. So we are just going to put a number 4 instead of this. So you can also add this list in a backward. So if I put the name for input like -1, then my square bracket, and I will access the last list, which is 24, as you can see 24. Now that's it for now. I don't want to keep this for too long. There is a lot of way that you can deal with this, and all of that will be covered later on, but I just wanted to give you a quick overview of what lists are. And next time we will continue with our algorithm, and we are going to continue with our code to learn how to access the useful information from the list of the answer packet that we got. Now once you're done with us in the Python interpreter like this, you can just simply type exit bracket and it will exit out from your Python interpreter. So now we have the basic idea of what lists are and how to use lists. So let's go back to this code and to see what we learned to practice. So the first thing what I want to do is modify this line, and we're going to modify the SRP function line as well. And again, if we go back to the documentation page of Escape, you'll see that this tells us that this function gives us the two lists. So we have an answer list and also unanswered list in our code. So we are not interested in unanswered list. So we're going to remove this unanswered list from our code. So there is no point of just using a variable here that we will never actually use in the code. So I'm going to, after removing the variable, I'm going to add a 0 in here. So in order to capture the answer list from the result to this function, we put a 0 between the two square bracket at the end of this line. So what this will do is, instead of giving me two elements like element 0 for the answer list and element 1 for the unanswered list, I am dealing it to give me element 0 because I am already interested in the first element of this list, which we as know the first element that has an index of 0, and this element is the answer list element. So now if we go back and run our code, and this will give me the same result that it used to give using answer list unanswered list, because after adding 0. So we are still able to capture the answer list that we have all the answers in here. Now the next thing we want to do is we want to able to extract the values from the MAC address and the IP from the answer list, because as I explained before, all we are doing right now is calling a method that's called summary. This is the method. So that is already programmed on escape module, that this method is just going to give us the same of all the data on the answer list, and we will also go there and remove this file because there is no usage for this line right now in our code, and we're going to try to dissect or break the answer list and access each element individually. So let's try power for elements in our answer list. Then we're going to type first element that we want to print. So last print. So let's just print element 1. So just type elements in 1 list 1 dot show and put second bracket, then type print So just like we learned before, if you have a packet object that you can do, just simply type show to see all the fields of the packet. So again, if we go back and print our code, as you can see, we have now lots of fields that we need to set. So as you can see, each of these packets have two layers and has an internet layer and then ARP layer, as you can see. And we can see the fields that are corresponded to each of these layer. So now look at this. We know what's interesting is like PSRC and also HWSRC, which is the IP address, PSSRC, which is the IP address, and which is the IP address of the packet that was sent from. So this is the IP of the client that was sent from the packet to us, and the HWARC, which is the hardware source, which is the MAC address of the client that sent the package back to us. So to access all of this, all you have to do is we have to use these two fields into our code and then print. So simply instead of show, we'll just use PSRC, then copy this line and also we'll paste this line and we'll run HW. So type HWPRC, and I think our code is done. So let's run this code. Okay, as you can see, so what we did is we print the HWSRC and so PSSRC in our code. So as you can see, we got the IP of the target person and also MAC address right here. So this brings us to the step 3, which like we managed to parse the value that are being captured in the answer list, and we learned how to use loops to iterate over list, and we got also more comfortable using lists, and we got more idea how to use list and what these lists do using our Python code, and then using list to analyze them and getting what we want that from that list. So last time we finished the third step of our algorithm, and we were able to extract the useful data from the answer packet list, and we actually even kind of done with this step that we are printing, because as you can see, this is the result that we saw previously, and we got the IP address, MAC address, all of those result in here, and also printing the MAC address and the IP in this skin. But in this lecture, I actually want to spend some time improving this print statement to print the result in a nicer preview, because it's kind of look messy right now. So to do that, I think you will be more comfortable with this list and loops of how to deal with this string and variable and printing them on screen. So it's going to be a very easy task. All you need to do is just modify your code. You don't need to write any new code. So what you need to do is you need to, so this was our result, printing result on our previous code, and what you want to do is we want to keep this as similarly like this for like IP address, MAC address. So we want to have like separate IP address and all IPs will be shown in here, and MAC address, all MAC will be shown in here. So as you can see, it's now showing in vertically, but we want to do this for these two parts horizontally. So I did some modify. So as you can see, I did print, and what this will do is after IP it will put a blank and it will put MAC address separately after IP name, and as you can see, this is the blank that we create for this line. So this is the blank line, and after that this is the same as previously. And what we did is, previously we printed on vertically, which is after this one is after this one, but right now what we did is we created a blank so that it show result after this. So MAC address and IP address and MAC address will show simultaneously, like similarly like this. But as you can see, previously it was right beneath the IP address, but it won't show like this, and this is the blank page or blank line. This will show after each of this line. So let's run this code. And as you can see, it shows the similar way. You can use any mode like 1 2 3 4 5 1 2 3 4 5, because I think it was more short. As you can see, it looks much cleaner right now. As you can see, we have removed these lines like begin emission, finish packet, receive packet, all of those. So these are not print right now in here. As you can see, it simply printed the IP address, MAC address, and all of those similarly like this. As you can see, pretty much identical. Yeah, now, so for each element we are printing the element IP address and MAC address from our loop, and to the next element of the same until we reach the answer list. So what we're going to get is, as you can see, is a perfect result using a simple modifying code. Just simply adding this line and this blank line, this is the blank line, this is the blank spaces, and also this is the blank line for this. As you can see, it's now looks pretty much cool and I think standard. So as a result, we are printing a table that has a 2 column under the IP and IP column, and we have a IP and MAC address column, and we have the MAC address that corresponded the IPs right here. So that's the end of this lecture, and it is actually the end of our algorithm. So we managed to achieve our goal, which is to discover all the clients on the same network, and the final stage was to print the result, and that we actually did, and we're printing the result in a nicer way like this, which is pretty standard. Like as you can see, a built-in tool which is called, so this is the tool that we used. This is the built-in tool on Kali Linux machine, but we use our Python code to print similarly like this from our Kali Linux tool. So that's a nicer way that we put our code and also print result in here. So now the script is done and it's doing our job, and it's printing the IP addresses and the MAC and the client at the same network. So it's doing this using a manual way. So we are actually crafting the packet and that we want to send, and we're sending it ourselves, and we're receiving the response and person everything ourselves, and then we're printing it on the screen, and it's pretty cool. And it also use a function called scan. So we have put passing a variable of the IP that you want to scan it, and also it can be based on our variable, so that's all good. You can use that, and also that you learned in our previous lecture to get this script to accept our arguments. So take the IP address as an argument, and you can implement that exactly the same way as it covered before. So in this lecture, it will be a good practice for you to do that. So what I want to do is, I want to improve the code. So in a result, the program is going to be the same, but in code here, I don't think this code is good enough. I think we can do better as we do that. As usual, I'm going to go a new concept and you're going to learn more about Python. So what I wanted to do is I would like to have a function that will do the scanning for me. So in return, some kind of variable or a data structure that contains the result of this scan can have like completely separate function that print the result. So why I would like to do that, because it's going to have a function that only do one task and do the task very well. The reason behind this is maybe in future I don't want to have this function that will do the scanning for me but not the printing result. So maybe I am using this in a big program and I have already printed the result before. So I am doing multiple scan and I just only want to print the count one time and then I don't want to print it to the other one. So there is a lot of reason you might want to do this, and it always when you are programming. So it's always a good idea to break your program into a number or a smaller section of each function, doing only one task instead of doing upward task that we have in here. So we have done this counting and we're actually doing the printing on one function, and in order to achieve this we need to return the answer list, capture it, and whatever we're calling the program then pass it to this program variable to the function. So that's going to be the do the printing, and as we know the answer list contain a lot of information that's not useful to us. So we want to have a list that only contain the MAC address and the IP address. Therefore, I think it's a better idea to construct our own variable and our own list, and in that list only put the stuff that is useful to us. So only put the MAC address and the IP address. So in order to do that, we can use this for lowrite, and which iterates over each element of the list, then store the IP address and the MAC address to the list. So this is the first element of the list of the IP address and the second element of the list of the MAC address. Now this will work and it's perfectly fine. And first of all, we're going to end up with next list, and we're going to have a one big list, and then each element of this list is a smaller list in which the first element of the IP address and the second element of the MAC address is there. So alternatively you can use a dictionary, and I think using dictionary is a better implementation of this. Not only that, but it will also give me an opportunity to introduce you to the dictionary and get you using them in a practical useful example. So basically what dictionary is you can think of this dictionary as list. They are very similar to list in a way that you can have variable, and that variable will correspond to a number of elements, and you will be able to access all of those elements using this variable. The main difference with list, as you remember, we used to access the element in the list based on their index. So if you want to access the first element, we use 0. If you want to access the third element, we use 2, for example, and so on. So we access element based on the location and the list. And the dictionary, we defined a key for each element for each value, and we access the value based on the key. So now let's look at the example of dictionary in a Python terminal or Python interpreter. I actually did this, so let's describe how this works. So in a Python right here, we're going to creating a variable called, so first type Python and it give you all of those, and then type target underscore client, and this variable is going to be the list, so I'm only using curly bracket, and we're going to define the first key, which is MAC, and we're going to set the value, which is going to be the MAC address, and which is 0001. This is the value of the MAC address. Then we're going to set IP, then our IP address, then OS and Windows, which is the OS. So this is the key for the next element, that then the value of the next element. So when you are going to set it to Windows, it's very simple. So we have a variable name and we are making it equal to something. So we created a dictionary because we enclose our elements between curly brackets. So this time not square brackets, because remember we are using square brackets for list, but now we use curly brackets for dictionaries. So they are two different things. As you can see, we have three elements separated by comma, and the first part we define as key. So we put a colon and then we put the value of this key. So just press enter, and if this show nothing, then your code is right and it's working, and then you can access the value in this dictionary. So just type print target client and it will give you all the print that we put. So now let's type what you want to print is IP. So we want to print IP. So what this will show? This will show this. So as you can see, after printing IP, it show this result. After printing OS, it will show this result. So as you can see, Windows. So again, instead of using the index or its location, we're using the key. And you, after you want to quit, so simply type exit and it will take you out of the interpreter, and that's all of it. I just wanted to give you a quick overview of what dictionaries are, how to create one, how to use one. And I know this is kind of boring example because it's not really part of a useful program, but we'll put this in a practice in our next lecture, and we'll see how we can use this with the network scanner that we created. Okay, now that we know what dictionaries are and how to use them, so let's put what we learned into practice. So from what I said in our previous lectures, my goal is to have a function that return a variable, and that variable is going to contain a list in each element, and the list is going to contain a IP address of the client and the MAC address of a client. So each element in this list is not a single value and it's not a single string. It's actually another structure, and this structure can be another list, like I said. But I said it's not going to be very pretty and it's nicer to use a dictionary. So what we are going to create in here, so I already did the code, so I'll describe how actually this each line is doing. So we created a list of dictionaries, and let me show you what I mean. So in our code, we know that we have a answer list, which is this one. In the list of content that contain all the row information, so it contains the information that we need and a lot of information that is not useful to us. So this is where we want to extract our information, and we also want to know that this list will iterate over each element in the answer underscore list or dot list, so that we can capture the interesting stuff in here. So we captured the IP and captured the MAC address. So to create a big list, we are going to have created a big list outside this loop, this for loop. Because if we have created a loop inside that, we are going to create a list for each element and this variable and then the answer list, and we don't want to do that. So I created a list outside in here, as you can see, client underscore list, and it's empty list because I don't have any elements to add it right now. So just saying that I wanted to create a new variable, and this variable is going to be called is client list, and is going to be a list. List means square bracket, and as we know, dictionary means curly bracket. So this is the list, as you can see. Right now I have nothing to add this list, so just created an empty list for me, and I'm using square brackets in here because I want to use this as a list. So we have a loop in here. to iterate over each element of our answer list. So the first list that contains the useful information and the not unuseful information we are going to do is we are going to create each element, and I want to create a dictionary. So after loop, just right click client underscore dictionary. So as you can see, we are going to call this dictionary as client underscore dict, which is the dictionary. As you can see, curly bracket means dictionary. And we, just like I show you in our previous lecture, so we are going to set the key for each element like IP, then MAC address, as you can see. So the IP will be this and the MAC address will be this. And then we're going to print the client list, which is this one. So basically what we're doing in this is we're going to add a client dictionary. So basically you are adding the dictionary to right here as an element to the big list, and that's it. We are done, and everything is previously similar like this. And we're client list dot append to client dictionary. So what's going to happen in this loop is like we are going to go for each element and these big lists that contain useful and not so useful data. So we created a dictionary, and dictionary will have keys and it will give you IP address and the MAC address. So we also set the value of the IP address and MAC address, which is PSRC and also HWRC for each dictionary. Now once done with all of these, with our appending our data, so let's print our list to see what happens. So let's run our code, and as you can see, so we have IP and MAC address, and also in dictionary, as you can see, you have IP for this and this, which is this IP and this MAC address when the loop is finished. So after the loop finish iterating to all of our elements, the answer list. So after that, we have a number of dictionaries. So with our first dictionary, as you can see, we have the IP key, which is this, and the MAC key, which is this, and the value for each IP key and MAC key, as you can see, for each of these key results are in here into the dictionary. So it goes same for all elements with this list. So this is exactly what you want to achieve. So it's exactly what you want to see in this table. So it's actually a very nice way of storing the useful data and the data structure. So in the next time, we'll see how we can iterate over this and how we can accept the useful data and print it on the screen. So now what I'm going to do is I'm going to iterate over the list and the dictionaries using a for loop. So I will show you that how we can do that. First of all, let's tie down our code. So the main reason why we are going through the trouble of storing is that everything in the list of dictionaries is so that we can have a tidy code, because I want to have a function that will do the scanning for me and return the list of dictionaries that contains the data. So and then we have a function that will do the printing, and this will make our code nicer, and it will also make it nicer to reuse in the future. So the first thing that I'm going to do is just remove this line. So remove this print statement because we are going to have a printing in a different function. Also we want this function to return the client, that is client list that is not printed. So we are going to have a return. So previously it was print client list, so it will now have return client list. So also we want this function to return the client, not print. So we are going to do return client list, and this way I will be able to capture this variable whenever this function finishes the execution, and then pass it to my print function, which will be this. So let's create our print function. As you can see, just type def print result and I will result the list. And the first thing that we will do is my function is to print this line, which will just print the IP and the MAC address, and put a line after this just for the header. So literally just this part of the output we would want to iterate over the list so that we got, and so the list we're going to get is going to be pretty much the list that we created in here. So we are going to start to iterate over each element in that list. So we are going to use a for loop, and here we call the element, and we can call the element in here. So just to make it the code more readable and to more easier to understand, I am going to call this as client. So we are saying that for each client, and my result will be the list. So I want to print the client, so just print client. Now I want you to guess what we will do, because when we print this, I want to print the element. So we should do scan result underscore. This is the same, because previously it was just this. Now what you have to do is you have to scan the result. We're going to capture the value and list, and that being returned from the function is a variable called scan result. And in the next line we're going to print our scan function. So we're going to say print result is equal print result bracket scan underscore function scan result. And what I want to print is I want to print all of those. Then so we are calling like this, and this will return a list on the dictionary of each element that represent a client. So we are capturing and starting a variable called scan result, and then we are calling the print result, giving it a scan result, and then we got the function that iterate over each element and the list that it will print over the element for us. And this is not going to be the end result, and it's going to be something that will work from here. So let's run our code. As you can see, it's perfect, and we are getting a dictionary for each element. And the first part for the dictionary, we can see the keys in here, the values and the keys and the values. So these are the keys, the values, keys, the values. So as you can see, for IP this is the IP, for MAC this is the MAC. So instead of saying client in here, so let's type define things. So let's edit so add this line. Previously I tested this, so just type client IP for IP key, then put blank spaces, then put client MAC, and this will put MAC and separately. So let's run this code again. Just simply adding this line, this simple code, as you can see it gives separately. So as you can see, we are getting the result perfectly, and you can see we are getting our result. We have the IPCs in here, and we have the clients, and we managed to achieve that using two separate functions, and one of them does is scanning and result a list of dictionaries, and other one is iterate out the result and print on the screen. So that's it for this lecture. I just wanted first of all introduce you to the dictionaries, then show you the more example of iterating and access and values and list in dictionaries and in list of dictionaries and so on. Now again, what you learned throughout this lecture, you can adapt it to anything you can learn in the future. For example, the same way that I showed you to accessing the elements and iterating and all of that you can apply in a different types of data. So you can use list of other data types, you can use a list of any other object that you might want to use, or use object as values inside dictionaries and so on, and you'll be able to use them and access them and iterate over them exactly the same way that I am showing you right in here. So in this lecture I want to use everything that we learn and build so far to build a generic vulnerability scanner. So this is a program that takes a target website and first it matches the whole website and then it cached his website for vulnerability and weaknesses. So once done, it's going to give you a report of all the vulnerabilities that it was able to find. The word generic is very important in this scanner because we are going to write it in a way that it's very easy to extend. So when it comes to discovering the application vulnerability, the process is pretty much the same regardless of the type of the vulnerability. Therefore, our program is going to be generic. So let's say in a month time from now you did some reading and learn about a new type of vulnerabilities. Then all you are going to and have to do is maybe write 3 or 4 more lines in our existing code to make it cover to this new vulnerability. As we write this, you are going to learn more about object oriented programming and how to structure your program in a way so that it can be easily extended. Now before we go into the programming this vulnerability scanner, let me show you in action. Again, this will be our teaser, and don't worry about how it works. We will cover this in the details in next lectures. So for now I just wanted to get an idea of the goal or of the program that I want to build. So what you have to do now is so I just run this scanner doing the Python vulnerability scanner.py. As you can see, the first thing that is going to do is discover all the links and all the pages in the target website. Then for each one of those pages they are going to extract all the parameters and all the forms. So finally for each one of those parameter and forms is going to submit the code to discover the vulnerability. Then once again when it's done, is going to show me the result. As you can see, I highlighted this part. It was able to discover and accesses vulnerability. So in here, so again, don't worry about what I mean by accesses and what I mean by vulnerability, and don't worry about how this is work. We will talk about all of this in the next lectures and how this works and how we will get to this point. This is just our end product and the teaser to show you what I want to achieve by the end of this topic lecture. Now when it comes to the covering the vulnerabilities in why application main concept or the main idea that I usually talk about my lectures, even in my previous lectures where we do everything manually, is to go ahead and use the website and access all the links that you gathered in the information gathering page stage. And then every time when see a variable or an input that has been sent to the web application, to the web server, then try to manipulate this input and modify it to the test for all the vulnerabilities that you learned. So the main idea is, if we go back to the diagram of how a website works, so if we look at the diagram to see how a website works, then you can see that the user usually make request and the request get executed by the web application on the website server, and then it responds to return to the user. Now some request contain data that get used by the web application. So what we usually do is manipulate the data and try to send some malicious code or malicious payload and in order to exploit some kind of vulnerability. Now usually data is sent to the web server using two main concepts. The first one is through the URL, and you usually see the file name and the data is being sent to the followed by a parameter. So you can think of this as a variable and followed by a variable which is 1, as you can see 1. So in this example, sometimes you actually don't see the file name and you only see the value which is 1 in here. We don't actually really care about the file name. If we see the value, then we can manipulate this data, and instead of sending one, we can send payload to the test for a scaling injection for the vulnerabilities. The second form is the input element, which is through the input element, and send data to a web server or a web application through the input boxes. So we have seen such boxes and check boxes before any websites, and every time you fill this with data, this data gets sent to the web application. Now in most cases in this example, the data will be sent through post, and therefore you will not be able to see the data and the URL. You only see the data in the URL if it's being sent using the get method. So let me show you a quick example. So right now I am on my Kali Linux machine and I am on a Facebook registration form page. And if you look at the URL in here, you will see that there is a parameter called reference type, and the value for this parameter is registration form. So basically, when you access this link to any browser and you send to this Facebook web application a value called registration form. Now Facebook's web application is going to use this value somewhere in their code. So it's similar the way when we write functions, for example, and they take a variable and they use the variable somewhere in our code. This is exactly what web application is doing. It's actually taking this value and it's used in it somewhere in their code. So we as hackers usually try to do is, instead of sending those values as is default value that the web application expects, we usually manipulate this and send values that allow us to discover a number of vulnerabilities. Now the value that we send depends on the vulnerability that we are trying to discover, but we always follow the same concept. We manipulate the input and analyze the output to see if the web application is vulnerable, and if it is, then we will exploit it again using the same ideas. So instead of sending code to discover the vulnerability, we will send code to exploit the vulnerability. Now, like I said, this is the first common way of sending data to a web application from the user from the web browser. The second way is, like I said, using text boxes. So right here, this is actually a vulnerable web page on my Metasploit machine. So I am using this as this default web IP address, and if you just go to this address and type /me tilde, then you will go to this website. But before that, you have to let me couple disclaimer that you have to install a XAMPP on your machine, and I have to install their service. As you can see, mine is running MySQL database, Moco, FT. So you have to run those database, then you can go to this website. Now otherwise you cannot just enter to this website. So you have to download and install XAMPP, and then install me tilde on htdoc folder, or copy me tilde on htdoc folder, then you can visit this. Otherwise you cannot visit this. So make sure you do this process. So back to this website. So I am accessing using the IP address of my Metasploit machine, and if you just use this, and it will go to this website. And if you go to this section, and then you can go to cross-site scripting, and then reflected and DNS lookup, and then this page will load up. And this page actually does send some data over the URL using it. So, but at the same time, it contains an input box. So you can put any value that you want this input box. Similarly, the way you can manipulate this value in here. So, and therefore, when testing for vulnerabilities, you should always test the text boxes for the same vulnerabilities that you test the parameters that you see in the URL. Now we have seen before how to discover all the URL in a page, and then using that we learned in Python. We can manipulate this URL and send anything that we want. So we really have nothing to cover there. We will cover how to use that to automatically discover vulnerabilities and get request or in parameter later in these lectures. The main thing that we haven't covered is how to actually discover the form in a page. So we covered how to fill values for forms and submit them before, but using Python. So if I use if I give a page or a link to my Python program, it's not able to discover whether the page contain any forms or not. And even if we manage to do that, we need to also discover all those inputs and the buttons, so that we can actually submit this form. Because before when I showed you how to submit a form, we manually fill the names and the input of the location when the form should be submitted. So we cannot really use that in a automatic program to automatically discover vulnerabilities through these forms. So in the next lecture, I am going to show you how to extract forms from any HTML page and extract all those useful data from this form, so that we can use it later and in our program to automatically discover vulnerabilities that can be exploited through these forms. So now the main goal is to write a program or a function that takes a URL and returns all the forms in the URL with the inputs and the link which we can submit this form. So previously I showed you a way to extract a specific element from a HTML page that we did in our program. So we did it using a get method. Now, as you know, you can use is to find any subtract within a bigger strength. So using a regular expression, and as we see before, regular expression are really powerful, hence we are able to use them to extract all the HTML link from a HTML page. Now as we see in the hostname login, in order to post a form data, we have to first know all the URL that we want to post to. So we need to find all the inputs and find the input name. As you see, you can put them in the directory and then submit them using request.post then so you can do all of this using that, and but because this is a little bit complex, I want to show you how to use it. Is a module that called Beautiful Soup, which is pretty easy, and this module is really powerful to parse and extract useful data from the HTML page. So as usual, what I am going to show you is an example, but you can use this module to extract literally any part of any HTML page. So first of all, before we can use Beautiful Soup, you have to import it. So what I have to do is import Beautiful Soup. So just type from Beautiful Soup _import _Beautiful Soup. So now once we have this imported, the first thing we need to do is get the HTML code of the page that we want to parse. So we see how to do this before. Now we are going to say this is equal to parse. So the response is equal to request, as you can see in here, and we are going to give it a URL, this one, or then okay, let's just minimize this one. This we don't have to do anything in here. So I am going to say that my URL is URL is equal to this one, as you can see, this one, and we are going to pass the target URL to my request function. As you can see, we will pass this to my request function, which will call this function right here, and I am giving this HTTP this URL, and I don't need to need this in here because I not need this in here. Because it just appends the HTTP to the URL. So now, as we know, if I just print this response.content, I will get the HTML code of this page right here, the page that can be accessed through this URL. So if we do this real quick here, you can see I will get the HTML code. So this is all good. Now we have done this before, and response that content and the HTML code on my target page. So going to the font part, now we are going to parse this HTML code using this Beautiful Soup. Now we are going to say that HTML is equal to Beautiful Soup, and I am going to give it this HTML code to my target web page, and which we can access by saying response.content. So basically all we are going to doing is calling a beautiful soup, and we're giving it a HTML code. Then we're gonna return an object, so which we're gonna store in the parts HTML variable. Then we are able to use that to access different parts of the HTML page, so you can use this. So like I said, to access any interesting part to you, I'm just using the forms as an example. So if we go to our target page, which is this one, and right click to the target page and go to the inspect. Now now we are in inspect element, so you will see the HTML code that responsible for rendering the part of this page. And as you can see, when I am over to this input, is highlighted it for me. Now if I go up a little bit and see the form ID, so and this form ID that I am interested in, so it's literally the highlighted part. So that's the part I am interested in. As you know, the most important part for me is the action, which is the URL, and that this form will be submitted to. And see what I have, only one input in here, as you can see, which is the text box. So if you go to the tables, you will see one input, as you can see, which is the text box. And this is where I want to manipulate the value and use value that might allow me to discover exploit or vulnerabilities. And then we have like another input, which is right here. So, and this input is the one that submit the form. Okay, this one that submit the form. Like I said, you can use this to extract all of this data, but before this way, the data will be extracted to the path and reject that you need to use. So this might be a little bit complex and it might not work against all websites. So using Beautiful Soup, it will be much easier, and you can actually use it to get all the forms and the page, not on this form, but to get all the forms and the page to this page. So I am going to say like form list is into equal to parts HTML dot find all and then form. So is this variable right here that contains the parts HTML, and I am going to say that I want to find all, and in here you can specify any HTML tag or element that you want to find. So in our previous example, we were interested into getting in the tags, because these are the tags that contains the link. So all you have to do is literally type in here, and in this example we are going to interested in this form of this page, so I am telling it that I want you to find all of the form element. So basically all the element that starts and end with form, if you want to find, so I will find all the form element. So any form and which element is in this page. So if I go ahead and print this my form list, and run the code, and you will see that you will have a one element in this list, and you will have the code that used inside this form, and it will have like action and method of this form, and it will see like you have it's a post method, and you will also have the input. So I have the first input and second input on this. After you will get the all input in the run executable or running code. So that's all. I want to show you how to further analyze these and extract the input and method and action. Then we will see how we can use that to with the post method that we used before. Okay, so now that we learned how to use Beautiful Soup to extract a specific element from an HTML page, let's now see how we can extract all the nested elements within this element. So basically in HTML, every time you create an element, for example, you have a form tag as in form ID or form ID. So as soon as you can see, when I click over mouse in here, the highlighted the start and the end of the form. So the actual HTML page, so this is the same. If you look at this where is it, script in here, even though this is JavaScript, it doesn't get displayed on the screen, but as you can see, it starts with a script and then it ends with a / script. But now going back to our example, which is the form ID. Now this is what we extracted, and as you can see inside this element, this is so similar. So we have a function like this one. As you can see, this is the code. This is what we extracted, and as you can see in this element, so similar, what we have a function, we have a code inside the body of this function. So let's type some code. Okay, so this one is, so as you can see inside it, we have a code inside this body of this function, and we have a loop. So we have this code inside of the body of the loop, and then HTML between the start of this and the end of this. So we can put HTML code using this code. It will be considered as the part of this element. So inside this form, you can see that we have a table. Then inside this table, and then also we have inputs in here. Now I'm talking a little bit too much about HTML. Now I want to show a general idea of the syntax of an HTML. So going back to this result displayed by our program, you can see that we have a list, because as I said, the code will use and extract all the form of this page. So if there were more forms, we will see them as an element of the list, but we only have one form on this page, therefore we only have one element. And again, as you can see, we don't have only have the start of the element, so we have the element plus all of the nested element that are inside. which are actually very interesting to us. So the first interesting thing is the action. Like I said, this is the page that gets submitted. This is the page that we tested this on this page. So if we want to submit this form, we have to submit it into a index.php page equal to like DNS, and now if we go and look up the URL here, and this is the same URL that will find this one, and this is not very important because it is the same as the URL, but in many scenarios you will actually see a different URL in the section of the main URL. So it is very important for us to know what the value is the action. So in our code we are now will printing a form list. So we are printing the form list, so which is basically a list in which each element in a form that target the HTML page. So let's assume that the list contain more than one element, and I want to access all of those elements. So because like I said, we want to extract all the forms, that what I have to do is use a loop like we see before. So all we have to do is just going to do a form for form in and form list, and I want to print the form. So what are we gonna do is we're creating a new variable called form. So it's gonna represent an element in this list, and then for each time we will have an element, and we are going to execute this code, and we are just printing this form. So if I and run it, so you will see, as you can see, the Python extracted from it indexes. So yeah, I have my form and I don't have the list that I start and end, which means I am actually accessing this one specific element. So I am accessing this one element at the time, but this is something that we have seen before, but what I did a lot. So now what I actually want to do is I want to start extracting the useful data from this form. Like I said, the first important thing is the action, and to extract any attribute like the action in here, or like the method in here, even if it is any other HTML element, for example the style in here, as you can see, style. So right now I am in a form and I want to get the action and the form, so it doesn't get any simpler than this. So I am going to store this and a variable called action, and I am going to print this. So if I run this, you will see, as you can see, this one. So you'll see that I will have an action right in here. So the next important thing I want to get is the method, and again the method is equal to for.get method. So I want to get the method, then again I can print this. So if I run my code, then you will see if you run my code, then you will see something like this. So we have the input in here and we have the another input in here, and whole input is not really important to me. What's important to me is the name of the input. So the name attributes are in the input, remember we use that in the guest login and used to set the name as the key of the dictionary, and we set the value to whatever value was we want. So that's the main reason why I need it in here, so that I can build up my dictionary and I can then submit the form. So far we know how can we use the dot and define all an actual element. So now if we go at the input list, this one, and define all and find all actual animal and define an attribute, it start with the sign and this mean, and this means that it's actual an HTML element. So we are actually going to use this same syntax as this. So and I'm going to say that my input list is equal to my form, because the input, if we go back and see where we are printing the form, the input are actually part of this form. As you can see in here, input are actually part of this form. So all of this form and inputs are all in here. So what I am actually saying is my input list is equal to form variable or form dot find all, that contains all the inputs, and I want to find all, and with the element that I want to find all occurrences, that it is my input, and then again exactly similar to what we are doing here, my input list is going to contain a list which each element and input inside then will form that I can iterate over it by doing for an input in my input list, and then I can just print the input, and this should print the input for me. And as you can see in here, I have already inputted all the pins. So again, as you can see, the name of an attribute is an actual HTML element. So to access attributes similar to what we are doing here, we can say that the input name is equal to input dot to get the name, and then I can just print the input name here. So if I run this, you will see I will have this input name which are the target host and the other name which we have in here. So we are going to summarize this whole mail so that you make sure you get the idea. So first, all you have to do is you have to parse the HTML code using beautiful soup, then it will be stored in a variable. Then every time you need to find an element, you will use this to find the all element on this variable. So we are looking for form, so we listed a form and here. So we iterate each element in this list. So every time we need to access an attribute, so something similar like class or similar like name, we dot form to dot get. So we got the action and we got the method by typing this by dot get. Then we want to get the inputs, and these are the basically actually all HTML elements. So we cannot use the dot get to get them, but similar to the form we use all method to find all the inputs in my current form. Then we iterate over them and then we extract the input name. So right now we have all things that we need in order to submit this form. So we actually know how to post request, and we have the URL to post because we extracted it from the action and we have the name of the inputs. So all we have to do now is use the same post method that I showed you before in order to post this form. So you will have to do slight modification before you do that, and I will cover this in the next lecture. Okay, so far our program takes a URL as an input and it extracts all the forms in that URL, and from it extract the action which is this URL, and this form submitted the type of the HTTP method. This is the method and should be used in order to submit this form, and the names of the application, this one is the impulse. So as we seen before in the guest login info program, we all need in order to submit a form is an action URL, and here we extracted form in here from here. So you will say that in a relative URL, so it will only work from this page or pages on this specific website. But if you want to make the request from our Python code, we need to use the full URL with the HTTP, with the website name or the IP address, and use it like that. So it won't work. So depending on the way the website is programmed, the function URL could be a full URL, so it can be a relative URL. So like without like a forward slash in here, without like forward slash, which means the index.php is at the web root, so right here before that. But luckily you don't need to account for all of these, because we can use a library in Python called URL parts. So what I am going to do is import in here. As you can see, I import URL parts. Then what we're going to do is I am going to say my post URL is equal to URL parts, which is the library that I just imported. Then the import.url. So then the function allow us to do the is join the URL. So once the full URL is done, then it will type is URL join, then target underscore URL, and the next is going to be the action. So it only the part of the URL. Now the result of this is going to be a full URL. Now that start with the domain name and contain the proper path. So if I print this post URL and run the code, and you will see something like this. So and as you can see here, I have the full URL which I should post from the form 2. So you can actually implement code to remove the last part of this. So remove the last part of the URL and append the action. But like I said, depend the way the page is programmed, you are gonna have to check. So to check if the action is already contained in a full URL, or the action start with the forward slash, or if does not start with the forward slash. So easy way to just to use the URL parts. So the URL joined, and that you will give you the full URL followed by the action, then it will automatically join it, and that will give you the URL that you can use it for the post method. So that's done. That's the first part we need in order to submit the form. The next part is create a dictionary similar to the one that which each key is input name, and we already extracted the input name, and each value is value. As you can see, already imported the name and value. So we can do this in very easily. First of all, you can just remove this print function from all of here. For the better, I just typed all of this again, so that you can better understand without removing all of this. So in this loop, as you can see, this is the similar loop. We're gonna input and we're gonna executing this loop for each input. So the first thing we're going to do is getting the input name. So I want to use this same idea to get the input type, and this is going to be equal to input. As you can see, input name, input type, and input value. Okay. Now the reason why I'm going to do this is because I only want to field text and the input that are the type text. So now you can see the type box in here. If you type box and it's a type text, as you can see, form ID tables. Where is table? This one is the table. As you can see, table. So I'm gonna input type. So what you have to do now is set the value. So we are going to say the input value is equal to test. As you can see in here, input value or input type is equal to test, which should be equal to the input dot get as this one, to get the value of the attribute. So basically what we are saying is that we are saying that the input value is equal to the value that we have in the attribute field in here. But if we input in type of like text similar to this one, then this will catch if statement. So just type if input underscore type, then type text. So all you have to do this is a dictionary, then we'll send this to the post data. So before we entering this input, we are going to create our post data dictionary. So this is the post data dictionary, and the key this is that this is going to input the name, like we did in the guest login. So the input name is the key in here, and the value is going to be the input value. Then once again, if we exit the loop, this means that we have the loop all over in our inputs. Each time taken the input name and the input value, then adding them to the post data dictionary and set in the input name and the input value, adding them to the post value or input value. Then we are ready to submit the form to. So to submit the form, all you need to do is request dot post type and then we want to post the post URL, this one. Then the variable is this one. So we want to set the data of my post data, which is the dictionary right here. Now let me post this in here to see. If you post this here, if you see that it will let you know that this has been submitted successfully, and in fact we will even see the result, because if you type test in the input box, then after that I will run this code and actually store the result of this variable and print the result.content, then I should get a HTML code of this, and the things I am going to be looking for this result for this test is that will mean that the value have set properly. So as you can see, if we run this test in here, as you can see in here, result for test, the value all have been set perfectly. This is the result for the test. Basically it means that we successfully set the value of the input box to test, and we successfully submitted the form and the web application that accepted the form. So now once you learn this about web application vulnerabilities such as SQL injection, access, and so on, all you have to do is, instead of submitting text submit or exploit or the payload, and then analyze it and to see if this got executed and then achieved your result. Now don't get too scared about this, because it's too much. I think those who are not interested in code, so don't get scared about this, and don't get also too intimidated. By the way, I am implementing these because I'm actually trying to show you a number of concepts, so that in my next lecture, when we put them all together to build the program, that will automatically discover the exploit for us. And like I said, it's very important to keep in mind that you can use a beautiful soup just like I did before to extract any HTML element from any HTML page. So not on that, you can see how powerful it is to extract the specific attributes or specific options that you can see within the HTML tag or within the HTML element. So all of these can be adapted and used in any scenario where you need to read the data from a HTML page. Now I think you have enough knowledge to start building your own vulnerability scanner. Now I know what you are thinking. I didn't teach you how to discover any type of vulnerabilities yet. Sure, I didn't even explain what vulnerability is. Well, basically a vulnerability is a weakness that can be used to hack the target website. The user can get more information about the website or the user. So there is a number of vulnerabilities, and there is a number of ways to discover and to exploit them, but the general idea is the same. That's why I want to show you how to build a generic vulnerability scanner that can be used to discover a large number of vulnerabilities. So first of all, I am going to show you how to build this, and then I will show you how easy it is to extend this generic scanner to discover different types of vulnerabilities. So the general step to discover any vulnerability, regardless of what it is the all you have to make sure that you need a site that you go and into every different possible page, then build into something that can do that. And we also built into something with that can do these types of work. So we need to analyze that page and extract the URL on the forms, and then we have two important steps. The first one is to send payload to the discover of the vulnerability, and the next important step is to analyze the response that we got. So after sending the payload to see if we can, so these two are the main things. First one is the send payload, and the second one is the analyze the response. So as I said, the general steps are always the same regardless of what vulnerability you are trying to discover, and the only thing that would change into the thing is that the payload that we send and the response that we look for. So right now and in the next lecture, I want to build the program that can first of all make a map of a target website, extract the link in the form that send a text payload. So literally just gonna send this test, and then we are just going to analyze the result that we get as it is. Then I will show you how easy it is just to write a simple method to discover a specific vulnerabilities, and then you will be able to write method for all different types of vulnerabilities. So later on all you have to do is digitally just extend the base code, and then we are going to write. So let's go ahead and get to this. So we are going to analyze the result we get added, and I will show you how to do that. So I have this scanner.py, and I have this vulnerability scanner.py. The scanner.py is here. As you can see, it is a class in which I am going to implement most of the code that will do the hard work for us. Then we have a vulnerability scanner, and this is going to be a very simple program that literally calls the class and executed the code that implements in it. So as you can see, I have already done all the work because it took a lot of time to fix the error. So I just took the code. Now I'm gonna just describe in details how this will work in every step by step. So we're gonna do is we're gonna type def, then we're gonna just type init, then it will simply do auto work. As you can see, init, as you can see, it will do all the work itself. So just type this, and as you know, we are going to be scanner and this will scan a certain website for the vulnerability. So I'm going to make this as a URL and as an input. So we're gonna say like self dot target URL is equal to URL, and this one. So now throughout all the method that I'm going to build in my lecture, I'll be able to access the URL saying self dot target underscore URL. Now going back to the step that we need to do is, first thing we need to do as human is to go into every possible page. Now basically build a sitemap of a target website or call the target website, and we already have a program for that. So it's the corollary program that we built before. So just you can find this code in online, just Google it and you will get that. But if you want to type, just type it and follow this all same process that I will be telling. So let's go back to this. First we need to import our request, and then we need to import our library because it's used in here. So I'm just going to do and just type import RE. Then what we need to do is we need to use the method that is crawl, and you need to see the first thing is that if you did any wrong, it will see in this code. As you can see, there is no error. So if you do or does something wrong, it will show error underscore in code. So as you can see, it's all done. So if you saw error, just retype this and it will be all right. Then what you want to call it, we have to say like self dot the method name extract underscore line underscore from. Then the next thing the have to do is the library path. So the main target URL that we start looking is inside our function. So what you have to do is like a target URL, or then you have to use first you have to link this URL page, but first you have to import our URL page, and then what I have to do is we have defined all things in here. So what I have to do is I need to create one in here because I haven't created previously, so I have to initialize this by creating one method. So what we're gonna do is self dot target underscore link, and we need to add self before. So if you do mistakes, like if you forget to add text self dot, make sure you add this, because most of the mistakes that I did was I forgot to add self in every one of those lines. As you can see, every one of those lines, so you have to must add self. Now all it is, as you can see, it is inside the method, and so now what you have to do is you have to print this and just type print link and then save call link. So what you have to do now is we have to go to our second Python code, and I am going to say like my vulnerability scanner is equal to scanner dot scanner. This one should be first case, because as you can see we defined this as capital, so we have to use this as capital, because as we know class names should start with the capital letter, and this will take an input of the URL of my target. So let's actually create a variable, so we'll call it target URL. So this is the variable. This will this is going to be this me tilde, and here so we will pass this into my vulnerable scanner dot call, and this will save in, for instance, variable of the target URL in here. And the next thing that I want to do is I want to call the curl method to make the list of all the possible link to my target. As we know, in the end of the method everything is going to be stored in my target link, because we are implementing it here at this line, but also printed out for this. As you can see, this will be print. So now I want this to pass to the target URL twice, and I will address this as soon. So let's test this code to see if it works. So just go to terminal, as I already did. So let's show you the code. So just type the Python. As you can see, I already typed the Python code, and it will work perfectly. As you can see, this is working as expected. It's making a list of all the possible links on the target website, and now all of these links are going to be stored inside all of this will be stored inside this. Okay, let me show you. All of these will be stored in this target URL, self target URL. So all of this will be self target link. So all of this will be saved in a self target link, then which I will be able to access throughout all other method, and then I am going to implement in our next lecture. Okay, now that we are sure that our program works fine and we are able to call the crawl method, call method from our scanner function, and it's able to get us all the links and store them in my target link, self target link variable. I want to address one minor issue. As you can see, when I first created my object, and the vulnerability is a kind of a object, and I am giving it the target URL, which is great. The target URL is going to store in self.target.url in this class, and I can access this, and I want this in my class. But if we look in my code again, when I call the crawl, I give it a target URL. Again, this really doesn't make sense, because I want to only give the target URL once when I create the object, and when I call the crawl should automatically know that it should start from the target URL that has given to the class, because the value of this already stored in this self target URLs. Now you might think that this is very easy. All I have to do is now remove URL, and every time I remove the URL and from here, and every time I use URL in this code, I am going to use self.target URL. Now this would be the case if this function wasn't a recursive function, as you can see, because this function is a recursive function, so it is calling itself in here, and the way it also calls itself, it calls itself with the current link. So every time it calls, is going to call itself on a completely new link. So if I use self target.url, then I will not be able to use this function to discover all the links and all the web pages. So it will only discover the link in one web pages, which is one of these self.target URL. So what I am going to do today is actually introduce you to something that is new, simple and useful, which is like using a default value for an argument. So I am going to keep this method to take the URL argument, but I am going to say that the default value for this URL is not basically, which means that I can call this method without specifying a URL, and the method will set the value of a URL to none. So what will this do is, it will allow me to call the method, as I already typed this default value. So what this will allow me to call the method like without specifying a URL, and in this case the value of a URL is going to be none. So I can call it without specifying a URL like previously as we saw. So in this case, the value of the URL is going to be the value passed of the method. Now we still have one problem. If we call the curl in here without specifying a URL, then the value of a URL is going to be said to be the default value, which is not, because I am specifying it here as none. So you can specify it as anything you want, but I am setting it none. Then this is going to be my method in here, although all the codes in here as well, and because this is none, it will actually crash my code. So what I have to do is, now I have to check in here, and I am going to say if my URL is equal to none, then this means that this method has been called from outside of this class, not from the recursive call from here, and that means that I should start from the target URL. So I am going to say that URL is equal to self.target URL. which is the URL that the user sets on target. So when they create this scanner, otherwise if the URL is passed to the method, then the URL is going to be directly used in the method as a value, and this is passed it, as you can see, this passed it the URL, and this will make our code very nice, because right now we can create the object like target URL, and I can just say that I want my vulnerability scanner to scan crawling, because I want this scanner to scan crawling. So if you just run this code again, it will just like previously, it will work just fine as previously. This will simply just work like this. So this is just a new and nice tip to know, because it's very handy and you can easily use it anywhere, not only inside the method. You can use this function, and you can set it at default value to anything you want. You don't have to select none, just as I did, you can choose it anything you want. I am just setting it none because it makes sense to me in this example. Now in this lecture I will talk about a new feature to our crawler. So we know that it works perfectly with pretty much all websites. Now it is going to have a problem, and websites that are require you to log in, and maybe you have a normal website such as that security, but also if you log in like this website, so if you log in, you will have more functionality such as the user page. So this page might contain link and other vulnerabilities, but our crawler is going to miss that because it's won't be able to log in. Now you might think this is simple. All you have to do is just use the code that we use on the previously, that we log into a website, which is the code login in the which is the code that I have right here in the program. So we create a dictionary of the inputs. So we put the username and the password and the input button, and then we send them by a post request with a parameter. But this will not work, because when you send this request you will log in, and that's fine, but this what is request is over. When the request is over, you will get the response and you will automatically be logged out. So you can think of it as if you close the browser and you delete all the history and cookies and all of that. So let me show you. So just previously all codes, so I'm just taking this and I took all the screenshots and showing this on a slideshow, because my machine is currently on down, so that's why I had to show you on a slideshow. So I'm going to target the website, which is this one. So I also need to import request in here, and this code should work just fine. But as you can see, it will be, so if you run this code, it will be work just fine. As you can see, it's able to get me one link at the end. As you can see this here, this is the one link in the login page. So basically the code is working fine. It's able to get all the links in here, but there is the one link, and even though we gave it a code to login, we know that this code right here is allow me to login in. So and we tested this before, but we are still not able to log in, because this login process is fine and it will be successful. But by the end of it, you can imagine that if you're gonna log in here, as a human normally, and then you will close the browser and delete the history. Then every time when you make a new request after that to extract all the links, you will be logged out and you want to be able to get the links to know the solution. So this is actually very easy. So, and this is the code part. So let me just and what I did in here scanner on my scanner code is that as soon as we create this scanner object, I am going to create a session. So I am going to say that say self is my session, which is equal to request dot session. So we are going is what we are doing is we are creating a session object which will represent our current session. Then throughout my program, every time I want to send a request, whether it supports or I get request, instead of doing that request dot method name, we are going to say self dot session, which is this one, self dot session, followed by the method name, which is URL or says request. So right now in my program I have called the request and I am using the get method, but instead of calling the request library, you can do like self session. Then we can use this dot get dot, as you can see in here, dot post So as we see them before, the advantage of this is as soon as we create the object in here, we will create a session. So you can think of this as if you are opening a web browser, then everything I will do, it will be done throughout this session. So whenever I log in, I am going to do, instead of calling the request, and then I'm going to do the request.session part, and when I'm gonna say that I want to call my vulnerability dot scanner dot session, and then do this session, and this is the code of this website. So as you can see, tender result. So this data will be used to log in the login page, which is with a username of admin and the password of password. And then once again, when I log in, I will not lose that session because it will be stored in the session variable of self dot session dot as you can see self dot session dot get session the following by the method that I want to use. This will allow me to send them request from that session. So if I log in, I will be always log in unless I always go and log out. Now I should actually put this login in the target URL. So I am going to follow this slash dba slash login.php, and I also don't need to store the result of this anywhere because I don't really want to use it. I just want to log in, and I'm not going to need the request library in here anymore. So let's just go, if you go and test your code, and as you can see, it will run just perfect. As you can see, it is logged in and it's actually getting me more links that I was getting before. So as you can see, previously I also got one, So now they are giving me a lot of the options. So it means that you want to be able to send any request to the website again without login. And now there will be a problem because this link logout.php is added to my target list, because this means that whatever I run my scan on this link, it will actually log me out of the session, and I want to be able to do anything anymore on the website. So what I'm actually going to do is I'm going to create a variable after the target URL. As you can see in here, and we're going to call this link to, and as you can see, calling this in link and in link not in self. And I want to tell my program to ignore and not send the request to. So if you just type this and only the first element in our case, it will show. Then I want to pass this list to my vulnerability scanner, and so we are going to pass it in here, link to ignore, and then I'm going to modify the constructor method to take this as an input. So as you can see, we will call this link to ignore, and then where I do the crawling, which is the call. So to call checks, as you can see in here, so if this link is not an external link, if it's unique, then it will ignore. And I also want to check if the link is not in my self.link. As you can see, self.link target link dot append. Then I want to make a request to it, so I want to even start in my target link, because this is not a regular link, it is actually our link in my link to my ignore. As you can see, links to ignore, this is the line you have to type correctly to execute this line. So if we just run this program again, when we face it will work just fine and just like previously, but we face some problems in future that you want to fix, and you would actually face even in crawling and other websites, but it's not an issue for this particular website, because we are able to get all the links before crawling the logout link. So by now that we finished the first step and the most of the second step, so we have a program that we can use to make a list of all the possible targets on our target website. Now we will extract all the link from these links that we can obviously send the data. So if there is an equal in the link, then the second part of the point is to be able to extract the from as well. So now, as we already built a program that can extract forms, and as we spoke how this works in details, not what I'm going to do, I'm actually going to describe, I also paste all those codes. Now I'm going to describe what actually this code is doing. So as you can see, I already typed the code, so I will just simplify to these codes to tell you what this actually specific line is doing. So first I need to do is import a beautiful soup, because that's what used in order to extract the forms, and then I'll just like to have a method that is called exact forms. As you can see in here, exact forms, and this method would take the URL and when it's finished the execution, I want to return on the forms that is given in the URL. Now that we already have something that will do that, which is implementing in here, so just copy these lines what I wrote. So if you don't remember how they work, so right here we make a request to this target URL. As you can see, we make a request to this URL. So then my object is I will need to do save.session. As you can see, save.session. So I'll do a request through my session, and this is going to get request. As you can see, this is a get request, and this request should be made to the variable that we are getting here as an input, so which is called URL dot parts.url join. So we are starting to get a result in a variable called parts.html. So this is the variable parts.html. Then we are getting to find all the method to find all the element from a form tag. Now instead of saving this as a variable, I am going to return on the form. And that we discovered in this method. So the next thing I want to do is able to submit this form. So I would like to have a method called submit form. So this is the method. So I would like to do is I would like this method to take the form that we want to submit the value, then we want to set the input in the form and the URL. As you can see, input, form and URL. So URL of the page, and this form was extracted from the action, and this is important to know because we are going to submit this form too. Then I actually wrote this code, and so is going to join the target URL as an action. So in this example, the target URL was the URL which we got from the from. So in this example, you are like this list where we get the form, and this is going to be a paste method of this URL variable. So this is going to be the URL, and that we are extracting the method in here. So that form that can be sent using get or post, as you can see. So I used get. So we are extracting in here, and we are extracting all the inputs and this form for iterating, and we are getting the name, type and the value of this form. As you can see, name, type and value. So we are setting its value to text. So I would actually like to set it value to value. So as you can see, value. So we pass this method, and after this I am going to remove test and set that to value. As you can see, I set that to value. And finally we are adding this input to our dictionary, which then we saved it as a post request. As you can see, method is post. Now I am actually don't want to store the result in a result variable, so I am going to return the result. So as you can see, this will return the result. Now one thing that I want to modify, and I did modify in this code, was the end of the oppose is the, you have to type return. So then after that it will get this post session from the params called for post data. So now after that, if you visit this website, BWA website, to go to as XSS reflected page, then we will have a form that is vulnerable called XSS. So if you just write and the inspect element, you can see the method of the form. So I'm going to check if my method is equal to post. So if it is, then we are going to send this as a post request and should be sent that session to as my session, not as a new request. And if the method is not post, then it will not be executed. So when there is a option to return in self destruction dot the self destruction, that we're going to increase that size, and instead of saying the data is equal to post, so if the method is post, then it will get the post of the URL. So a get request of the post URL, then we will send the same post data, but we will just using the get method this time. So we are passing the post data to a parameter argument instead of a data, and that's it for the code. It will allow us now then extract from a specific URL, and it will also submit a form. Now this should be called as submit form. So as you can see, this is the submit form. So first let's try to extract this form from this web page. So just copy it and the program. So and I'm not actually going to call, because I'm just going to say I want to call my vulnerability scanner dot exact form. Then I'm going to give it the URL to the exact form that are going to run the code, and I should actually print this, because so if you print this, it will get you the responses which is equal to vulnerability scanner dot form. Then we will give it a form a first argument. Now it is going to be my form which select the first element to my list, then which is my first form. Then we are going to give it the value that we want, then to submit it. So if you just submit this as test, then and then you are giving it a URL which is the form exists, and it's in this URL. Now this is a very rough testing, and we are actually going to use this method in later to discover or exploit the vulnerabilities. Now I'm just making sure that this method that I just built is working. So just run this into, as you can see, this will print the submit test. As you can see, hello test in here. So as you can see, the value that I'm submitting is being submitted because it's saying hello test, and this is basically what happens when you put something in here. So if you just type test in this blank box and just submit, you will see that it will say hello test. So right now, using a Python program, we are able to extract forms and submit them. Now in the next lecture, we will continue building to our scanner, and we will see how we can use it to exploit the vulnerabilities. Okay, so now our program is able to get all the links from all the pages in my target website. It's also able to extract all the forms, and it's been able to submit these forms and send requests to these links to and capture the links and read them. So pretty much I have everything except the implementation of the last two steps, which is sending a request to discover or exploit the vulnerability and then analyze the response to check if this vulnerability exists. So I am going to build a method called run scanner, and so we are going to do this scanner which will actually run this scan. So first let me explain the in details in what these lines are doing. Now if you just follow this code, it will work just fine. Or let me just simply describe all of this. So the main goal of this method is to iterate over each link in my target and the link list, and then each one of them has a link that extract the form test from the forms, then test the link, and if you discover anything, then display a message. So let me show you how you do that actually. So very simple, and keep in mind that I still didn't teach you how to discover and exploit vulnerabilities, and I still don't expect you to know how to do that. So we'll talk about that later on. So I'm just trying to show you a generic how generic this program is. Now I'm going to say for each link of my self dot target link, as you can see self dot target link, I want first of all extract all the forms, and this method is to take a link to an input. Then we are basically using this method right here, which will return to a list of forms that exist in the URL that we pass it. So we are passing it one link at a time, and the list of forms that will be stored in my form variable. Then for each form, this will be form list. So in forms, I want to test this form for vulnerabilities. So first of all, I am going to print a message. So print a message, and then followed by the link that we are testing. So just to tell the user that we are testing this specific link, and then again in here we can call the method that we will implement later on the discover vulnerabilities in link, and then that's it for the run scanner method. So it's a very simple method. As you can see, it's just a couple of lines. So all it's going to do is it's going to iterate of all our targets that we collect in our crawler for each links. First of all, it's going to extract all the forms using our extract form method. As you can see, this is the extract form method. Then this is going to iterate over all of those forms. For each time, we are going to start calling method to discover the vulnerabilities in forms in here. Then once done with the testing the form, we are going to test if the current link contain an equal sign. As you can see, this one equal sign. So if it does, then this means that this link sends data to the web application. So in here again we will call method to test vulnerabilities and get the request in the URL. So right now I am actually done with this program, and as you can see how generic this program is. All you have to do is to learn about the web application vulnerabilities, and all you have to do is implement a method here to discover the vulnerabilities, then call it here. If it discovers the vulnerabilities in forms or in here, it discovers the vulnerability in a link. So if you have so this is in my opinion, this is just a general ethical lecture which talks about the basic website to discover vulnerabilities. So my main point, I want to show you that how to build the program that is generic and easy to build, and build up on it, discover a number of then vulnerabilities, and not just build one program for each vulnerability and having to build a new one from the sketch. So every time you need to discover or learn about a new vulnerabilities, you will need this. So in the next lecture we are going to talk about the XSS vulnerabilities, how you can exploit those vulnerabilities and all. Okay, so now we will be talking about the exploiting the vulnerabilities. So we haven't seen a good way of exploiting it, although we are doing like injecting a very simple code and just display an alert on this screen saying that this website is vulnerable. So what I want to do now is I want to do something more advanced. I want to be able to control the victim and do stuff on the target computers. And on the people's that they visit the vulnerable pages that we inject our code, we are going to use beef to do this. So we had to look to use before. So what we are going to do is we are going to use this beef to hook a URL, then we are going to inject it into a third access page so that everybody who visited that page will be hooked to the beef. Then we will be able to run all the commands that beef allows us to do on the target computer. So I am going to start. So you can start beef on your Windows or even on your virtual machine like any Linux distributor, like I am using on Kali Linux. So just type beef. It is a built-in application, so just type beef and type your password and it will run automatically. You don't need to do anything, it's all built-in application on Linux. So give the username as beef. So as you can see, it's all load up, and as you can see I already did those vulnerability tests on my machine. As you can see now they are on offline. So what I'm gonna do is, as I already did this vulnerability accesses, I'm just gonna show you or talk about you how you can do that in a PowerPoint slide. So let's talk about in here. Okay, so what you have to do now is you have to first you have to copy this. Let me show you. You have to copy this script, and this is the must one. You have to copy this script, and just copy this and you are done the next process. So what you're gonna do is you have to go to this XSS store, and you must have to use DBA, because otherwise you cannot use or exploit or test on HTTPS website. You have, for this test purpose we are going this BIF web page. So in default you will be in home pages. So what you have to do is you have to go this XSS store, and then this page will show up. As you can see, store cross site scripting. Then you can just type name and message. That what I have asked you to copy, you just copy it here and paste the victim machine that you want to vulnerable or execute the vulnerability. So you must have to use this IP, target IP. So here, that after that you just sign guestbook, and this will execute it on this browser. So my target is also, after applying this, so my target will be executed on this special website. So who is going to visit this website, they will just like we explained, the code will be executed, the script code, and any person who visit the page will be suffered from this vulnerability. So if we go back to our BIF application, then as you can see, this IP address, this is the victim IP address that will show up. So what you have to do now is you have to just click to this machine, then all those details will show up. Then so I want to run a specific command, so just go to this command, then search or type any command as you want. So but we're gonna use a specific command which is alert command. So just type alert command, just type alert in here, it will show up. As you can see, it will show up alert command. Then what you write in here in this box, it will show up all in this page. Whoever visit this page, it will show up in here. So just type anything in this page. So if you just type and execute this, then whoever visited, as you can see, whoever visited this page will be seeing this BIF alert dialog. So now I just did that to show you that everything is working perfectly. Now anybody who browses our target's website, the vulnerability website, will get hooked to BIF this application, and you can run all the commands in here that we have seen, and like before, getting access using a notification bar. So you're using the PT theft, getting the screenshot inject. So you can do all kinds of like these attacks on any person who visited this particular vulnerable page, because we injected our hook script on that page, and is the part of that page, this page. As you can see, we injected this in our page. So it's a part of the page. So every time the page loads up by anyone, they will be hooked to BIF. So okay, now that you know what XSS is and how to use this for vulnerability, I want to use it as an example and implement a method in my vulnerability scanner, so that we can discover these types of vulnerabilities automatically and all the pages in my target website. So before I go into doing that, the first thing I want to do is I have to go to this meta exploit machine, and I want to set the default setting for the security setting to medium, because in default it is set to high, and high security level basically protects the website from XSS vulnerabilities. So the website then just become invulnerable. So to log into the meta exploitable, as you know, the username is msf admin, so just type that, and password is also the same. Then after the password extra, you might see that there are no characters and user type. So I'm just going to go to the cd directory to change my working directory, and when I want to go to var as in slash wwe slash dbwa, and in this directory, and includes we list in here the file that I am interested in is the dvda, this file, and .php, this file, and I want to modify this file as a root or as a admin. So first of all, just type the as a sudo nano, and this one just type sudo nano, and this is the, so sudo is to run the open file as a admin, and the program that will open the file for me, and then that will open the dbwa page. So I am going to just going to press enter, and it will go to this page, and this is the setting page. So just scroll down, and as you can see, it is set in high by default. So what you have to do now is you have to set or delete this command and just type medium, and just press enter, and press exit, save and exit, Ctrl X to your keyboard, or just press enter. It will be done, and that will be saved. So this is the process how you set the default security level to medium, so that we can actually go ahead and test the vulnerability on the target website. So let's go to our machine and check the web page that is vulnerable to access. So as you know, in order to test this file, we will need to test this payload and the link. So I want to build a method that I want to call this method a test accesses. So what this method can be used to test accesses vulnerabilities in forms, and I want this method to first of all take the form, and we want to test the URL that the page contains. So first thing, I am going to set the accesses test script. So this is the script that you are seeing that we send in order to check if the target is vulnerable or not. So I am going to just copy this, and this is the script that we send in order to check if the target is vulnerable or not. So then I need to send a request to submitting the value as the input. So as we already have this method thus, so which is the submit form method in here. So all I have to do is now a response is equal self dot submit form, and the form that I want to submit is the form that I am going to get as an input. So the value that I want to submit is the accesses test script, as you can see, accesses test script, and the URL of the form of a URL that I am going to get as an input. So now I am going to submit this text as, and this actually will work because now that we are security as medium, so you can actually modify the payload setting to bypass the filtering. So just copy this, and once you submit this in here, you will see that we will be able to see the test script. So whatever we passed in here and the HTML code, we can actually check and say if my accesses test script is on the response dot content, which is the HTML code of the response that I am going to return. So basically I am going to say that this is vulnerable, and the method will automatically return none. So what that means is the target form is not vulnerable. So I'm just going to modify the code. So just, and also before that you can see this is the script that I was talking about. So what I have to know, I have to modify this script. Just type C in here. Without, as you can see previously it was small c, so I modified this as capital C. And now I'm going to, so instead of calling this to submit form, I'm going to call test XSS in form. So I'm going to give it the form that I want to test this in. Now we have also give the URL to the content of this form, which is given in here now. Now the result is going to store in a response. This time the response either going to be true or not true. So if this contains a vulnerability, otherwise it will be none. So I'm going to print this response. So just in this print this response, and after printing this, if you just test this, as you can see, if you run the code, it gives us true, which means, as you can see, true in here, which means that it was able to first of all send the test script, and it was able to analyze the result, and it was able to determine that the result means that this particular form is vulnerable to XSS vulnerabilities. So now we can eventually go ahead and use this in our scanner method, but I will leave this for my future lectures, because I want to cover how to discover accesses in links. Then we will put together in the future lectures. So now that I have a generic structure for a vulnerability scanner, not only that, but I also have the method that allow me to discover and exploit vulnerabilities. So that I do want to know now that how to combine everything so that my program can discover XSS vulnerabilities in all pages in a given target website. So let's go to my and check out this code that I implemented. So I tested it and I know that this method work, and I'm going to go back to this scanner method Python code. The generic method that I said you can discover any vulnerabilities in it, that you implemented a method to discover the vulnerabilities. So what we did now is that we have a method that discover accesses and links the inform, and the way we build that the run scanner method, and which is that is going to iterate over the target link, that is going to extract the form, and then in a particular line then is going to print the testing. As you can see, this will all print the testing form in a specific link. So I'm going to say that I'm going to create a new variable, and I'm going to call this a vulnerable XSS. So this is the vulnerable XSS. So the variable is going to equal to self. So this is equal, and this variable is, because right now we iterate over forms, and this form is, as you can see, self.test is XSS in forms, and we will also say in the following form that I am actually want to print the vulnerable form. As you can see, I am actually want to print the vulnerable form. So basically all I am doing is I am using a new variable called is vulnerable to access, and I am setting the value to this, to whatever value returned from the method that test accesses in the form. Now we know that this method returns true if the past form contains a vulnerability, otherwise it will return false. So if this is true, as we can see, if this is vulnerable is I'm going to print this as a vulnerable, and I'm going to print the form. Then I'm actually going to do something similar in here. So I'm going to say vulnerable to access, as you can see, vulnerable to accesses is equal to self.test accesses in link, and I'm going to pass it. Then the link as the input again will return either true or false. If it returns a true value, so if it is vulnerable to accesses, then I'm going to print discover accesses discover. So you can see how simple it is now so I'm going to print this discover accesses. So you can see how simple it is to extend my code to discover any types of vulnerability. The key is to actually write method to discover that vulnerability, and we can just call this method and run scanner. So if the method discovers a vulnerability in a form, we can call it in here, and it will discover a vulnerability in a form and with a link, and we can call it, and that's it. Now what I also want to do is, before we print, we discover the vulnerability, and I'm just going to add 2 new line characters, so it's easy for me to find it in the input. As you can see, these are the 2 line characters. So now my vulnerability scanner, and the first thing that going to do is we are going to crawl, and this is going to build my target list and store. So all the links in all the pages that my target website and the target link list, and then I'm going to call the vulnerability scanner dot session dot post to run the scanner and discover the vulnerabilities in this specific machine. As you can see, this is a DBWA website IP, and like I said, if you implement more method to discover more vulnerabilities, so if you put them in a scanner, they will automatically call them to the code in here. So as you can see, this is very simple, and all you do is heavy work will be done in here. All the heavy works will be done in here. So let's go ahead and run the code. So if you run the code, and it will work perfectly, and now if you see, they will run a lot of what this is doing is, it is doing a crawling and making a list of all the possible links. Then it was testing these links as normally, or else then it discovered a accesses vulnerability and the links, and we actually have tested this link before, and we know this it is vulnerable, and it is given us the 4 that is vulnerable to this. Then it's if you test another link, you can see that it will discover another access vulnerability that we didn't actually see, and that is actually stored in a accesses vulnerability. So what it exploit is that it is stored in a web page, and now anyone who visit the web page will actually see this vulnerability. So this, if you just paste any vulnerability script in this web browser URL, and then this will load up, because this code will be executed on their browser, and as you can see, the code is getting executed on my browser, because it was injected by this program in this here. Again, it giving us the form that vulnerable, and then it continuously testing other links which wasn't able to discover accesses vulnerabilities. So basically right now we built a program that can be used to automatically discover vulnerabilities into any website. So all you have to do is just give it the website, and the target will automatically map, and all the links that exist in this website it will automatically extract, and it will extract all the forms, and it will start submitting payload to discover vulnerabilities. So if these vulnerabilities exist, it will all show up in here. Now as I said, that you have to do is implement more method to discover other vulnerabilities other than XSS. Now in this lecture I covered how to discover and exploit XSS so that I can use it as an example in here, but I will not be covering any more web application vulnerabilities. The reason is that because this is a huge topic, a very big topic, and second, if I dive into that, I will need like 5, 6, 7 hours to complete those, even a half a day. So actually I did all of those to show how to discover and exploit web application vulnerabilities, and once you know how to do this manually, write in this and a program which is very simple. As you can see, once we understood how this XSS works, we were able to write a like just 3-line command. This is the 3-line command, and discover XSS. So just follow the SQL injection code or code execution or remote file inclusion vulnerabilities. The way they work is that first of all you send a payload or a test string, and then you analyze the result. So if the result is what you expect, then your target is vulnerable. So basically you can use the exact same code in here with the exact same template. All you will have to change is the code that you send in here, and maybe some slightly other couple of codes that you need to change. Therefore, if I actually covered this, I will be repeating myself a lot and wasting your time as well. So if you are interested in this subject of web application hacking or penetration testing, I already did many lectures or covered on penetration testing. So make sure, or you can just Google this about penetration testing or application hacking, and you will find a lot of articles that describe this and demonstration this in detail. So you will get knowledge of this, and so then after that you can come back to this program and implement other method to discover all the vulnerabilities that I showed in this lecture. So this is the main reason why I built this program first. Then I showed you how to discover, then I showed you how to exploit the vulnerability with it, because I want to stress the idea that a program is generic, then you can use it to discover any types of vulnerability. So once you understand how this XSS vulnerability works, so that's all about these XSS vulnerabilities.